Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. So, over the last 12 years, reading has added more value to my life than anything I've ever done or anyone I've met. So in this video, I want to share 10 of my top tips for reading more consistently. And if you follow the tips in this video, then there's a high chance you might even be able to read 100 books a year. But obviously, I just want to say up front, it does not matter how many books you actually manage to read every year. 100 is just an arbitrary number, just like anything else. What matters is that you are in fact reading and you are enjoying the process. Tip number 1 is one of my favorite quotes from investor and entrepreneur Naval Ravikant, where he says, "Read what you love until you love to read." And this is an idea that's actually still pretty underrated. Like, people who struggle to hit their reading goals often view reading as this major thing that you have to optimize, and you have to kind of read the difficult books or read the classics or like read Sapiens and try and like get through that for the 100th time.
Why is life so hard?
But it's kind of like with working out. The best workout is the workout that you are excited to do. Similarly, the best book is the one that you are excited to read in a given moment. Now for me, what I really enjoy reading is paranormal romance, fantasy fiction, and trashy romance novels that you get like recommended on Goodreads. And these are great because it's a nice, easy thing that I can read. And so if I'm ever in a position where I've sort of lost the habit of reading every day, instead of trying to dive in with like a really challenging novel or a really challenging book that's going to be pretty hard to read, it's not going to be particularly exciting, I'll dive in with something really easy until I love the process again. And then as I'm going along, I'll be able to tackle the more challenging books. So if you want an action point from this video, then ask yourself, what is one book that I would be really excited to read right now? And just go and read it. And in fact, I'd love to hear in the comments, what is that one book that you're most excited to read right now? All right, tip number 2 is that it's actually totally okay to quit books while you're in the middle of them. Again, reading has this weird thing. Like, we have this weird mindset around books that if I start a book, I then have to finish the book. And it's probably this thing that we've been told throughout school, that reading feels like work and it feels like a chore. And if you start a book, then you have to finish it. Otherwise, you're like deficient in some way. But the way that I personally find more helpful to think about books is that a book is just another medium of content delivery. Like a YouTube video is a medium of content delivery, as is an email newsletter, as is a blog post, as is a movie. Now, if you're watching this video on YouTube and you stop getting value from it, you wouldn't think twice about just like picking another video. You wouldn't be thinking, oh my goodness, this is a video, it's an educational video, I have to watch it through to the end. You'd be thinking, oh, it's a video, I might try it, maybe I vibe with it, maybe I don't. But either way, you're not like putting this major pressure on yourself to finish the video. But when it comes to books, we do this all the time. We put this pressure on ourselves to finish books that we've started. And so if we can get over that weirdness that we have around books and start thinking that it's actually okay to quit books while you're in the middle of them. And so a tangible action point here is, what is one book that you are currently in the middle of that you've been struggling to read? And once you've identified what that book is, you just tell yourself that you are going to abandon reading it for now. That doesn't mean you're never going to finish it. It just means you can always finish it later, and you can always start a new book that you're a little bit more excited about. Because one of the premises of my whole philosophy around productivity, which is why my book is called Feel Good Productivity, is that really the secret to productivity and doing stuff is to find a way to enjoy the process. If you are having to struggle through a book, it's probably not the right book for you at this time. All right, tip number 3 is to always buy the book. Now, books are somewhere between $5 and $20. They're fairly cheap in the grand scheme of things, and even if you don't have that sort of money, you probably know ways to acquire books even without paying for them. Not that I'm kind of endorsing any of that stuff, but you know what I mean. Now, back in the day when I didn't have any money, my approach to book recommendations was that if I ever got a book recommendation, I would find a way to acquire the book. That might have meant borrowing it from the local library or finding some other ways to get access to books. But these days, my philosophy, now that I do have some disposable income, is that anytime someone recommends a book, I will just buy the book without even thinking about it. A book is such a small cost for such a stupid amount of work. This is my book. I've spent 3.5 years working on this book. It's had literally thousands of hours of effort that's gone into it. It's had me, a researcher, an editor, another 3 editors going through the book, making sure everything is legit, a researcher to fact check absolutely everything we've talked about. There is a stupid amount of effort that goes into the production of a single book. And you can buy a book for somewhere between $5 and $20. And it's literally years of someone's life experience that's condensed into this thing that, like, there's almost no other medium that gives you such bang for your buck in terms of what you can learn and what you can get from a book. Which is why what I normally recommend is to lower your threshold for buying books. If you have the disposable income, just buy any book that you hear the recommendation of. If you don't, you can find a way to acquire it. And me personally, I can trace so many of my most life-changing decisions down to a single book. And so if you hear a book recommendation, you might as well just buy the book. Now, other than books, one other thing that I read on a regular basis happens to be a totally free email newsletter called Morning Brew, who are very kindly sponsoring this video. Morning Brew is a completely free daily email newsletter designed for busy people and professionals that updates you on all of the interesting news in the worlds of business and finance and tech in just a few minutes. Now, I used to waste a lot of time scrolling on different apps and news services, but now I just read Morning Brew most mornings, and that gives me basically everything I need to know in these worlds that I care about. It summarizes the world's must-know news every day, but unlike traditional news, it's actually entertaining, and it's written in a pretty engaging style that's fun and accessible and actually interesting for anyone to read. For example, Morning Brew is how I'm personally keeping up with all of the ridiculous stuff that's going on in the world of AI, and seeing if there's anything I can incorporate from that into my own life and my own business. I'm also using it to stay up to date with social media trends and movements, which generally helps me think about the long-term future of my business. There are over 4 million professionals like you and me reading Morning Brew every single day, and it is in fact totally free and takes less than 10 seconds to sign up, so you might as well. And if you fancy signing up, then do head over to morningbrewdaily.com/Ali or hit the link in the video description, and that will let you sign up completely for free, and you'll also be supporting the channel along the way. So thank you so much, Morning Brew, for sponsoring this video. Tip number 4 is to read multiple books at once. Again, this speaks to that point around it's okay to quit books. Like sometimes you're just not in the mood for a certain type of book. I often have about 8 or 9 different books on the go. Some of them are fiction, some of them are non-fiction, some of them are directly related to my work, some of them are completely unrelated to my work. And so to just give you an idea, I read for around half an hour at least every day. And the books that I'm currently in the process of reading are Excellent Advice for Living by Kevin Kelly, 8 Dates by John and Julie Gottman, Kundalini Tantra, which is a spirituality book, Crucial Conversations, which is a book about how to have important conversations, the fantasy fiction book Lightlark by Alex Astor, the fantasy fiction book Battle Mage by Peter Flannery, and finally One Blade of Grass, which is a Zen memoir by Henry Schuckman that I'm sort of 20% through. So this is quite a lot of books, and it's quite a lot of variety. There's a bit of self-help, bit of spirituality, bit of fiction, and it's nice because it means that every evening when I'm on my Kindle, just before bed, I can decide what do I feel like reading today, and I'll just go wherever my energy takes me. But if I only had one book that I was focusing on at a given time, I would then feel a lot more of that friction where I'm like, I don't really feel like, I don't know, doing a spirituality book tonight. If I didn't have an alternative option, then I just wouldn't read, and then I would lose the habit, and then I would end up reading a lot less.
Oh, also, another fantastic way of getting through lots of books is by using short form. They're an insanely good book summary service, by far the best one I've ever used, and they have summaries from all of the best non-fiction books across loads of different genres. They'll be linked down in the video description if you want to check them out.
Tip number 6 is to listen to audiobooks. Audiobooks are absolutely freaking life-changing. You can now get audiobooks on Audible. You can also get them on Spotify with Spotify Premium. You can also get them on Speechify if you use Speechify. Like, there's now lots and lots of ways of accessing audiobooks other than just Audible, which has been around for a very long time. But audiobooks are absolutely game-changing because it means that you can listen to books while you're on the go, while you're doing more interesting things. And one of the really nice things about listening to a book is that it's often easier to get through certain types of books when listening to them rather than when reading them. So for example, I'm currently listening to The Fellowship of the Ring, the first book in the Lord of the Rings series. I have tried reading that book tons and tons and tons of times over the years, but I've never quite been able to kind of battle through some of the heavier, denser descriptions. But having a really nice narrator reading it out to me makes me much more likely to get through it. Similarly, I tried reading Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari for absolutely ages. I never managed to get through it until I listened to it on Audible, and then I got through the whole thing, and I was like, damn, this is actually really good. Like, there are some books where listening to it is just so nice, but also obviously it means that you can do it while doing other things. One of my favorite things to do is to go on a walk while listening to an audiobook. So these days, as I'm getting in my 10,000 steps every day, I'm listening to the Lord of the Rings audiobook, and it's absolutely sick. Similarly, back when I had a day job and I used to commute to work and back, I'd be driving an hour each way to work when I worked at the hospital, and I'd be listening to the Brandon Sanderson fantasy book series, the Mistborn series, the Stormlight Archive, the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan, and these were just incredible long-ass fantasy series, and I'd be listening to them in the car, and I'd get to work and I'd be like, I don't want this to end. So if you haven't yet started reading audiobooks, I can wholeheartedly recommend. And in fact, I have narrated my own audiobook, and if you want to sign up to a free trial of Audible, you get 1 free credit. You can use it to buy my book. If you want, it's free. Might as well. Let's now move on to tip number 6, which is to shape your environment. So right now, I'm living a bit of a digital nomad year where I've got everything of mine in a suitcase and a backpack, which is why I don't really have many physical books on me. Although I do like to carry 1 or 2 physical books, and so I have obviously mine, so I can show it off in videos like this, and also this one, How to Change Your Life by Jake Humphrey and Damien Hughes, which is very nice so far. And so if you're a physical book kind of person, then shaping your environment means just having easy access to books. Like maybe you have a book on your bedside table, or 2 or 3, so that when you get into bed, you might as well reach for a book and read for a little bit. But it's not just your physical environment, it's also your digital environment. And so one thing that I find really useful to do is to design my iPhone home screens in a way that encourages me to read. And so on my home screen right now, I've got a calendar, I've got my habit tracker, I've got my to-do list app, and I've got the Kindle app, and I've also got the Readwise Reader app. Both of these things are things that encourage me to read. And then on one of the other pages of my phone, I've got the Kindle widget and the Audible widget. And so one thing that I found super helpful is to just not have any social media apps visible on my home screen. So if I want to go on Instagram, I have to physically scroll down and type type in Instagram for it to work. But the basic idea is that if you want to build any sort of habit, you want to try and give yourself little nudges to do that habit and to remind yourself that, oh yeah, this is a thing I wanted to do. And if you want to break any kind of bad habit, like for example, social media addiction or anything like that, you want to make it a little bit harder for you to access those things. And so action point here might be that, can you pause this video right now and just add a couple of reading themed apps to your phone screen? Maybe it's a Kindle app, maybe it's a Reader app, maybe it's a Spotify app for audiobooks or Audible, whatever that might be. There's a bunch of different apps for reading. But if you have those first thing on your home screen, then it's also helping you design your digital environment in a way that makes it a lot easier to read. Tip number 7, I've mentioned this a couple of times, but let me grab it. I could wholeheartedly recommend getting a Kindle. Kindle is just freaking incredible. It's an incredible device. It's stupidly cheap. They're like, I don't know, £50, $60, $70 at Amazon these days. You can get them cheaper if you have adverts on the front cover as well. I've been using a Kindle pretty much every day since 2008 when the original Kindle came out, and it's been one of the, if not the single most impactful tech device I have ever bought. It's just amazing because like, it's so nice reading on a Kindle. It's not quite as nice as reading on paper, but they're so light. I can carry a Kindle everywhere I go. I do in fact carry a Kindle everywhere I go. And these days when I'm staying in different Airbnbs and hotels and stuff, I will always take my Kindle out and have it on my bedside table, whereas my phone will be on charge all the way across the room, which means when I get into bed, I am not tempted to go on my phone. I'm in fact, the only thing I have access to is literally just my Kindle. And I can attribute the vast majority of books that I've been able to read while being busy and doing other things to the fact that I have a Kindle. And I also have the Kindle app on my phone so that I can read when I'm on the toilet and also when I'm on trains and buses and transport and taxis and all this sort of stuff where I wouldn't otherwise have my Kindle on me. So action point here is, if you don't yet have a Kindle, then consider buying one or some other kind of e-reader, or like ask for it as a gift. You use a Kindle consistently, I can pretty much guarantee that it will completely change your life. All right, tip number 8 is to consider gamifying your reading process using something like Goodreads. Now, Goodreads is like a social network thing for readers. It's owned by Amazon. It's a bit janky, but it does mean that if you start reading books on Kindle, it will automatically add it to your Goodreads library. And it's just kind of fun to sort of set up reading challenges and see how many books can I read when I'm on Goodreads. It's kind of fun to review books as well and give them a star rating, and you can just keep track of every single book you've ever read. If you don't want to use Goodreads, there's an app that I found recently called Sofa, which is a nice way to organize your downtime. That also lets you add books. The idea here is that if you can try and make it a little bit fun, turn it into a little bit of a game, when you finish a book, you give it a bit of a rating, you add it to your list, and then you feel yourself making progress by reading more and more books. That's just another little nudge that we can use to help build that habit of reading. Tip number 9 is to change your identity. This is something that James Clear talks a lot about in Atomic Habits, that if you do in fact want to build a habit that's particularly good for you, you want to start on the level of identity. It's much easier to read more books if you identify as someone who reads a lot of books, or if you identify as a reader, rather than if you have told yourself that you have the identity of someone who doesn't read, or like, oh, I don't read books, or I never read. It's like all of these things are disempowering things that you are saying to yourself. And so a fairly easy way of reading more books is to just shift into that identity. I am someone who reads, I'm someone who makes time to read. And you'll find that if you have that identity, it becomes a lot easier to take the daily actions. And then finally, tip number 10 is to genuinely stop caring about the numbers. I know this video, clickbait titles and all that crap, like 100 books a year, 50 books a year, 1,000 books a year, whatever. No one gives a shit about how many number of books you read. It's kind of fun to make the number go up, especially if you're trying to build a habit initially, just like, working out. It's kind of fun to see how many times can I actually get to the gym. But the main thing is that you want to be reading and you want to be enjoying the process of doing it, which is the entire thesis of my productivity philosophy. Productivity takes care of itself when you can find a way to enjoy the process. So again, it's not about the numbers. If you're reading nonfiction, it's far better to read just like maybe a handful of books in the year, or maybe even just one, maybe even half a book in the year, and to really absorb the insights and takeaways from it. Again, assuming you're reading for the sake of insight. But the most important thing is to not worry about the numbers so much and try your best to enjoy the process. So hopefully some of these tips will help you read a little bit more this year or next year. And if you're interested in trying to remember more of the things that you read, because you find that you read and then you forget whatever you've read, you might like to check out this video over here, which is all about how to remember basically everything you read. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.